It's amazing because knowing the why of the ice bath creation, and why you decided to get into business making the Morozko Forge, is important. I think people need to know you're not just some shyster that came along and heard that ice baths were a thing and decided to make it. This is personal for you, Jason. This is personal for your wife, Adrienne. This is personal for a lot of people who have been directly impacted, positively so, by things like ketogenic diets, by things like fasting, which as of the recording of this, I just finished a 6-day fast, and by ice baths, which I've been doing daily since the beginning of the year, as you well know, in your tub. So let's get to the Morozko Forge, because a lot of people, they ask me about your tub. I'm like, I don't work for them, guys. I'll get somebody from the company on. So tell us about the origins, because you're in Phoenix, Arizona. I remember you telling me the story at Dave Asprey's biohacking conference. That, hey, look, it gets like 100-something degrees in the dead of summer in Phoenix, and I want to do ice baths, but you can't always control the temperature. If you put ice in there, it just melts so fast you can't really get the benefits. So tell us the origin of the story, and your engineering comes into play in this story.
Yeah, so that kind of picks up almost, where we left off in the narrative. And so we were getting into ice baths, and we were doing it about once a week on Sundays. I'd taken my first few with a local Wim Hof instructor and yoga instructor named Gordon. And he was doing them sporadically at his house on Friday morning. It wasn't even every Friday morning. And you would get a text message on Thursday evening, says, hey, we're doing Wim Hof at the house tomorrow, 6 a.m. Bring 2 bags of ice if you're in, which was okay for me because, his house happened to be kind of on the way to my office job. And I had some schedule flexibility where it didn't really matter exactly what time I showed up. I could show up at 8, 8:30, 9, whatever. That was just the luxury that I had. Adrienne's office job was the opposite direction, and she was still in a very much, clock in, don't be 15 minutes late, kind of in that kind of office culture. Which is probably something else that isn't good for our health, but that's another podcast. And so I had done like 2 or 3 ice baths. I hadn't solidified any sort of like physical or philosophical understanding of how this was, going into all of the things that I was reading and thinking about. All I knew is like, again, my systems were rebooted and back online. I'm like, there was something here in this, something anti-fragile, something beneficial. It's not just some sort of party trick where it's like, oh, everybody look, Jason and Jimmy are taking the ice baths again. Wow, those crazy guys.
Yeah.
There was something powerful in this. And so we wanted to be able to do it. I wanted to be able to do it in my own backyard. I wanted Adrienne to be able to have the opportunity. So I just got my own stock tank from the feed store, dragged it to my backyard. And every Sunday, it was kind of the same thing. We would buy a bunch of ice. We'd invite people over, say, bring 2 bags of ice. And we had a good little group going, about 4 or 5 of us every Sunday. And then,
BYOI, is that what it would? Bring your own ice?
Yeah, bring your own ice. And we were still supplying most of the ice because I think we had maybe 2 or 3 friends who would show up from outside of the house. And so we were buying most of the ice. They're bringing their contributions, which was great. And we were still only getting 1 ice bath per week. And in the summertime in Phoenix, it's going to get 115, 120 degrees in the day. There are periods in the summertime here where the temperature does not drop below 100 degrees overnight.
Yeah.
A little side event, that's actually one of my favorite times of year in Phoenix is when it's midnight and it's still 100 degrees outside, because then it just feels like a warm hug. But when you're in the blaring heat of the day, first of all, the tap water gets up to like 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So as the summer heats up, so does our tap water. So There's not even really such a thing as a cold shower in Phoenix in the summertime. It comes out 80 degrees at the coldest you're going to get it out of the tap in some places. And so you're filling up your stock tank with 80-degree water. You're dumping in 200 pounds of ice, and you're getting maybe an hour and a half of an ice bath before your ice is gone. And that water's working its way back up to whatever the sun wants it to be at. And so we were looking for an easier way to do it. And we were also looking for a way to do it more often. I couldn't buy 200 pounds of ice every day. One of the things I started with was using Costco like pretzel and salsa containers. And so we had like these, because our sons were like just nomming on Costco pretzels back then. In retrospect, not the greatest thing I was letting them do, but anyways, it happened. And so we'd end up with like these big plastic buckets, and I'd cut the top off of it, and I
Yeah.
had a big stand-up freezer in the backyard, and I would fill up these plastic containers and also use some little like salsa ones and fill up these salsa containers, and I'd stick them in that freezer, and about 24 hours later they would be solid ice blocks. And so I'd
Yes.
come home from work, and I'd work on popping these ice blocks out of the containers. I'd stack the ice blocks up in the freezer, and then I'd fill up the containers again, and I'd do this as many times as I could throughout the week. And so by the end of the week, the only thing that I'd save myself is going to the store and getting the ice. I had all these ice blocks. It was taking me like 6 to 8 hours of labor each week just to create them. And I still only got one ice bath a week. And so this is when the kind of the engineering education kicks in. One of our friends, who's also one of our main founders and business partners, Tom Seeger, he's an engineering professor that I worked with when I was getting my civil engineering degree. And he was also one of the individuals coming over and taking the weekly ice baths, bringing his 2 bags of ice. And he was also at the time, because he's a research scientist, getting into whatever available literature was out there. So we were starting to solidify our understanding that this isn't just some feel good thing or some party trick that's going to impress your friends or look good on Instagram. We were starting to understand not only the systems that this practice and this therapy works on, but why and how.
Yes.
And so he brings over a little dorm fridge that I think he had at his office at Arizona State. And he's just like, Jason, tear it apart, figure out how it works, see what we can do. I'm like,
Yeah.
all right. And so the very first proof of concept experiment is I tore apart this dorm fridge. I figured out like what makes the cold, and pulled that out of the back and took a small styrofoam cooler, put some water in it. I would eventually figure out that this thing that makes the cold is called an evaporator, and it goes into the water. And I put the styrofoam lid on top. I plugged it in, and I walked away from it overnight because I wanted to see, do refrigeration parts from a refrigerator work this way, work in water? From my engineering education, I understood something very elegant, and that is that cold does not exist. Cold is the absence of thermal energy.
Right.
It is what happens when you take the thermal energy or kinetic energy or molecular energy out of matter and send it somewhere else. And so I understood that refrigerators work by drawing the thermal energy out of the enclosed space and dissipating it to the environment. But I have no idea if this works when the thing is submerged in a thing of water. So overnight, I come back and I froze the shit out of that water. I'm like, okay, so there's something here to this. And so then I tore apart 2 or 3 other refrigerators. We even bought one just to tear it apart. First we tore up that used one. Then I tore up the freezer that I was making the ice blocks in. I actually cracked the refrigeration system in that, like right when I had the damn thing tore apart. And so that became a useless piece of junk. So then we went and bought a refrigerator just to take it back to the yard and tear it apart. Did that. Took my stock tank and sat it on a bed of sand and put a pine box around it and sprayed it with a whole bunch of foam insulation. And I took the door from that freezer that I destroyed. I put it on top, and it's like 120, 125 degrees in Phoenix in the summer. And I've got 2 evaporators out of 2 different refrigerators just draped over the side. I plug the damn things in, and I walk away. I'm like, let's see if I can make myself an all-the-time ice bath. And that took, I think maybe 3 or 4 days before it really got down to some high 30s, some low 40s temperatures. But it just kept working itself down. It kept pulling out more thermal energy than what was working its way back in from the environment, which is what we needed. So it got down to freezing temperatures. And I said, well, here it is. Here's my all-the-time ice bath. It's ugly. It can't move anywhere, because it's sitting on a bed of sand. And it's big and it's clunky and it's just some ugly backyard engineering project. But I've got it and it's here. Now I can take an ice bath every day. And, at the same time this is happening, Tom's getting into the scientific literature. We're starting to follow social media trends, like you said, Jimmy. We didn't find ice baths, an ice bath market first and be like, here's a market opportunity. We were just solving a problem for ourselves and starting to follow hashtag Wim Hof, hashtag breathwork, hashtag ice bath. And what I kept seeing out there were people trying to solve the same problem in the way that I was trying to solve them with salsa containers. I kept seeing the same Costco salsa containers. Somebody hashtag ice bath, like, look, I made ice blocks out of my Costco salsa containers so that I don't got to buy bags of ice. And that's when we kind of sat around and we're like, this is a company, this is a product, this is an emerging culture within a subculture within our culture that has a problem that nobody is solving yet. So
well, how long ago was this, that all this narrative that you're telling us now, when did this happen?
This would have been 2018. So my first ice bath was October of 2017. By the time you get into spring and summer of 2018, we'd gotten through the backyard prototype, and we're coming to the realization that, we could work on this design. We could work on putting this together in a way where we can offer this solution to the people out there who really needed it. And so our first sale, our first customer was actually January of 2019. So we spent the rest of 2018 kind of taking that backyard engineering project, and I tore it all down. I've only got like one little wood piece left. It's a Forge 1 on it. And just like, okay, how do we build it again? How do we build it again? How are we going to ship this thing? How are we going to move it? Our first customers were here in Phoenix, and then we realized there's people somewhere else, and this is a big box. And just solving all these problems is how we spent a lot of 2019 as well.
Yes. Well, I can tell you as an owner, which, by the way, guys, they didn't give me one of these. I bought this with my money, so don't think that this is a paid promo. I love ice baths, and I got tired. Let me tell you a little bit of my story in case you hadn't heard. So I started 3 years ago, right in 2019-ish, doing colder showers. Now, I had heard about cold thermogenesis from way back in the paleo days, because I've been around forever and ever, amen. So over a decade ago in paleo, they were talking about this concept of cold thermogenesis and taking cold showers. And I thought that was the stupidest thing in the world. Why would you do that? Of course, not knowing the biological and the mental health benefits of it. And so 3 years ago, I just got to the point where I was like, I think I need to try that. And so in my bathroom, right in there, I would slowly, at the end of my hot shower, turn it down to warm. And that's where I started. People think, oh my gosh, I could never get into that icy bath like you do, the Morozko Forge. And I'm like, no, don't. You have to acclimate and work your way down. And so for me, it started with warm water, and then a little cooler, and then a little cooler, until I'm on the coldest setting, and I'm literally in there for like an hour, Jason, where I'm like, I just love it so much, because it becomes this addiction after a while. Once you get acclimated to cold, you kind of want more of it. So then from there, I bought 20-pound bags of ice from Sam's Club, filled up my little tub with my 6'3" body and my 4-foot tub. That shit got old really fast, but I did it for a little while, about a year, most of last year. And then I found out about your company, and I was like, holy crap. I would do ice baths more often, same thing you were talking about, if it was more convenient, if it was easy. And I saw you had a filtration system for the water. I saw that it made its own ice. That was cool. People still get enamored by that. Where do you get all that ice from? I'm like, it makes it. That's the magic of the Morozko Forge. And so I couldn't afford it, but I was like, you know what? I see this as an investment. I feel like I need to invest in Jimmy, and I already know I'm getting benefits from cold thermogenesis. Let's up the game and let's get this bad boy so I can do it more often. And thus I created this challenge in 2022 where I would get in there every single day for 5 minutes a day. I got 7.5 minutes the other day. I decided to push it a little bit longer just to see if I could go longer. And I did okay. I was a little more numb over the body with that, but it was worth it to try. But all of those things is why I'm glad that you created the Morozko Forge. And it's an amazing thing. Like, yes, guys, it's expensive, but it's unique. It's also something that if you had it, you would do more cold thermogenesis and you would get that benefit. And that's what we're talking about at the end of the day. We want people to experience the adjunct benefits to their keto or carnivore diet, to their fasting plan, to all these other things that you do to optimize your health look at the ice bath in a similar way.